bad at I'm really bad at a lot of things. I'm really bad at microphones. I hit them, and I'm really bad at this stuff, so bear with me. You'd think having a PhD, you know what you're doing, but not always. Okay, so I'm going to talk about maintaining hope and supporting carers. That's who I am. Charlotte Tottman, clinical psychologist. My contact details. I didn't bring any business cards. My husband's coming to pick me up. I said, just send him a text and say, bring some business cards. So if you want to get in touch with me afterwards, hopefully there'll be some cards that I can give you. I'm a psycho-oncologist, which is just fancy language for a clinical psychologist who specialises in cancer-related distress. I'm going to talk to you tonight from three perspectives: from the theory of psycho-oncology, from my clinical practice, and from my own personal experience. That's on 2 counts. My mum had ovarian cancer, so our family has lived it. And even though it's not directly related, I was diagnosed with breast cancer last year, so I kind of understand what it's like to have cancer and be treated for cancer. Before I go any further, some of what I might say might push some emotional buttons, and if it does, and if you feel like it's dragged up some stuff for you after tonight, it's really important that you seek some support, whether that's from a trusted friend or a family member or someone in your medical team or your psychologist, but debrief with someone if you're feeling a bit rattled afterwards. Usually things like that settle with a sleep, but not always. Okay, so maintaining hope. What is hope? So it's a feeling of expectation and wanting a certain thing to happen. And I was thinking about, okay, well, what does that mean for someone who has ovarian cancer or for a family living with ovarian cancer? And the things that came to mind are probably the hope that the cancer will stay away, maybe that the hope that maybe a new treatment will emerge, maybe that I won't die or that I won't die soon. So they're pretty big hopes, you know, it's not a small hope. It's hope about big stuff. I make the distinction when I'm working with people between what I call hope and denial. So hope is really important, but too much hope can make you vulnerable, make you more vulnerable. So I make the distinction between what I call realistic optimism, which is hope, and unrealistic optimism, which is denial. So if you think about that like as on a graph, what I say to people is realistic optimism takes you about there, and unrealistic optimism takes you about there. And the problem with unrealistic optimism is that if you get some bad news, the drop is a lot further. So it's about understanding your situation, your health status, your prognosis, not the stuff that's on the internet, not the stuff that's happening to other people, but what's going on with you, and setting where your hope is around that. Does that make sense? What we don't want is for people who are already vulnerable to engage in thoughts and feelings and behaviours that actually make them more vulnerable. So hope is really important, but like everything, it's like we've got to have hope at the right space, in the right space. So why is hope important? Whenever I speak, I never feel comfortable standing up and speaking to people off the cuff without having done a bit of research. And so even though I talk about this stuff all day, every day, I was thinking, okay, well, like, why is hope really important? Like, why does it matter? And the research around it that I found that makes sense to me, because it's what I see clinically, is that psychologically, hope gives us a reason to keep going. I mean, the opposite of hope is despair, which is kind of going, well, there isn't any point. There's no reason to get out of bed. There's no reason to go for that walk. There's no reason to go and catch up with my oncologist or have my chemotherapy or go and do anything healthy, because what's the point? So hope psychologically gives us purpose. It keeps us going. So it's really important. And that's the psychological side of it, which feeds into the physical side of it. So if you are hopeful and you do have a reason to keep going, you actually have a reason to engage in healthy lifestyle behaviours. So things like making sure that you are getting enough rest, that you are eating well, that you are going to see your medical team, that you are engaging in the sort of uplifting behaviours that are going to support you while you go through your cancer treatment, while you live the life that you have. Does that make sense? So you can see why hope is really important, and that without hope, we would be in a very dire situation. So then we need to look at, okay, well if hope's important and we should have it and we do need it, then what gets in the way of it? And boy, is that list long. So running through the left-hand side. So the sort of stuff that gets in the way of hope, that makes you feel like maybe, what's the point? Medical treatment, medical reviews, which are scary, make you worry about what am I going to find out? Is the cancer back? Is the treatment working? The treatment side effects, Ganeshan talked a lot about those, and aren't there a lot of them, and aren't they all lovely? Anger, fear, stress, all get in the way of hope. Uncertainty. When you get a cancer diagnosis, I say to people, you get a cancer diagnosis and you get a whole bunch of uncertainty. And really, that uncertainty doesn't go away. And living with that uncertainty, living with that fear of the unknown is really hard. Other people's stuff, other people's behaviours gets in the way of hope, yeah? People are clumsy and clunky and forget and say the wrong thing and do the wrong thing and can make us feel like, you know, do you care? Why should I bother? What am I making all this effort for, yeah? Inaccurate information. The internet is great in so many ways, and it's so unhelpful in so many ways. Dr. Google is terrifying, and it's really terrifying when you've got something like ovarian cancer, yeah? Because most of the stuff you read is pretty grim. Other patients' cancer experiences can make us feel less hopeful because we can hear about people who don't live as long as we thought, do pass away, do have multiple recurrences, do have really rugged cancer experiences. And when we buy into that and we think, well, if it could happen to them, it could happen to me, that can get in the way of hope. A cancer-centric life. I imagine that most of you understand what I mean by that. You open your diary and all you see is just one sort of a medical appointment after another, yeah? And life can feel like it is entirely about cancer, and that gets in the way of hope. And so that's where it's important to make sure that you've got a life that might not be balanced, but it's got other stuff in it other than cancer-related activities. What's your bad news strike rate? If you've seen the doctor 5 times and every time you got bad news, that's going to get in the way of hope, yeah? And unfortunately, with a disease like ovarian cancer, which you know is a recurrent disease, the bad news strike rate is often higher for people with ovarian cancer than it is for some other types of cancer. And that can make it hard to maintain that hope. And ovarian cancer's reputation, it doesn't have a good one. It's not the poster girl. Yeah, it's not breast cancer. So, what makes room for hope? Being present in the moment. Both Ganeshan and Amanda talked about the idea of being kind of present in the moment, being mindful, and that's important because it takes you away from anxiety, which is largely worry about the future, and depression, which is largely ruminating about the past, and it's about being in the moment, enjoying the stuff in the present, enjoying the sunshine today. I walked outside my consulting rooms in the middle of the day to check the letterbox, and I stood in the sun for 1 minute and thought, oh God, this is gorgeous. What am I doing inside? It's that stuff, being mindful in the moment, enjoying the small things. Making short-term achievable goals, setting things up that are kind of, I say to most clients, that are maybe like a month long. You can see the end before you start, and they need to be goals that are small enough that they're achievable and big enough that they mean something, and also that they have purpose and meaning. So they mean something to you. If you like gardening, decide what you're going to do with a part of your garden. If you like writing, write an article. If you like sewing, make a dress for your granddaughter. But set a small project and work towards it. It gives you a way to measure your life and the fact that you're not standing still and that you're not just a cancer patient. Focus on things you can control. When you get a cancer diagnosis, when you're in treatment, when you're dealing with something like ovarian cancer, there is so much that's outside your control. And sometimes we can get caught up in that. And that's not helpful for how we feel psychologically. So sometimes it's about noticing, okay, well, what can I control? And again, these things have been highlighted today. Things like the stuff that I put in my mouth, how much attention I pay to physical activity, what I do with my sleep, that sort of stuff you can control. One of the things I noticed since my diagnosis was that I am much more almost obsessed with what I eat and my sleep and my exercise, because I can't do much about the other stuff, but I can do stuff about that. Empathy is gold, okay? That's spending time with and connecting with people who get it, yeah? That emotional isolation that Amanda talked about, that sense of people around you who previously you've been close to, but who might not get it. And it's not because they don't want to, it's because they can't, because they haven't walked a mile in your shoes. And so then finding people who have, and it might be other people with a cancer experience, it might be other people with a health experience, it might just be other people because of their own life experience, they have a capacity to get it in a way that works for you. And I say to people, go where the empathy is, yeah? Go where you're understood. And good quality information about your personal health status. So your hope will be related to what you know about your personal health situation. Not about what you think it might be, not what about it is in the research, not what you read about on Dr. Google, but what your oncologist tells you about your situation and what you can be hopeful about. So on to supporting carers. Being a carer, it's not usually a choice, just like getting cancer is not usually a choice, not ever a choice. People often wake up one day and find themselves a carer. Not many people that I know put in a job application to be a carer of a loved one. Yeah, they might put in a job application to be a carer of someone else, but not to be a carer of a loved one. It just sort of happens. Why do people become carers? So there are some things that are the obvious ones. You know, we do it because we love someone. We do it because we stood up and made our wedding vows and made a commitment a long time ago. We do it because there's a sense of duty and obligation. We do it because it's out of necessity, because there mightn't be anyone else. Sometimes we do it out of guilt, because we feel like I have to. And sometimes we do it because of what we think other people will think if we don't. At any one time in my client list, I've always got a number of people who are caring and a number of people within that number who are caring and staying in a relationship because they feel they should. And that's tricky. So the motivations for carers can be complicated, and that can be tough for them. And a lot of that stuff they can't say out loud. When you become a carer, I think that your stress load changes on 3 levels. So the bottom level is that there's often a shift in that if there's 2 people in a relationship and they've used to been sharing a lot of the kind of day-to-day running of life, the household admin, the domestic chores, often when one person gets a cancer diagnosis, that balance shifts. It might not go from 50-50 to 100-0. Usually it was never 50-50, let's be honest. But maybe it goes from 70-30 to 80-20. It's usually a big shift. And that can be tough for the carer. They can be suddenly doing a bunch of stuff that they don't know how to do. They can often be in middle age, so they can be relatively old dogs learning relatively new tricks. My husband had to start doing all the banking and finance when I got sick. Oh my God. We learnt some lessons the hard way. The second level is that you then are caring for someone else that you love. And what that means is that you don't have them to help you, so you're a man down, and they need you, so you are a burden up. So the burden on the carer can be quite significant. And with that can go not just the physical caring, but all of the emotional caring and support, but also your own emotional worry, your own emotional fear about what this disease, what this experience could mean for not just your partner's life, but also for your life, for your future, for your finances, for your kids, for all sorts of things. And then there are changes to the carer's own lifestyle behaviours. When you become a carer, it affects everything, yeah? It might mean that you have to give up work or change your hours. It might mean that you can't do the hobbies or the activities that you used to do. It changes your social network, who you see, when you see them. It changes the nature of those relationships. It changes the relationship with your partner. So there are all sorts of changes to the carer's own day-to-day existence. They might have had a nice little routine that had been going fairly smoothly for probably quite a long time, and then all of a sudden they are finding themselves going to medical appointments, learning about activities and behaviours, learning skills that they never imagined they would have. I had a guy in this week, this Monday, and his wife is in the late stages of metastatic breast cancer, and he's an academic, and he's had to give up his job, and he is now managing a morphine pump and cooking tiny meals and feeding soup 1 spoon at a time. He didn't ever think this was going to happen. 2 weeks before he said to me, Charlotte, I don't know if I can do this. Not I can't do this emotionally. I literally don't know how to do this physically. I don't think I have the skills. I mean, he's learned, but it wasn't what he was expecting. So this is the impact on the carer's own life. It affects work, hobbies, relationships, finances, social activities, their own healthy lifestyle behaviours. This same man messaged me this morning and he said, I didn't get any sleep last night because the morphine pump went off 4 times, and so he kept getting up to deal with the morphine pump. So his sleep is being impacted. You probably all know that everything is worse without good quality sleep. It's like acid on your coping resources. So just at the time when he needs to be at the top of his game, he's having experiences that are making it even harder for him to do that. Physical health. I hear the stories a lot, and this actually happened in my own family. My dad got bowel cancer when he was 64 and died when he was 67, and Mum cared for him for most of that time. And she took her eye off the ball. She was a really healthy person. 3 months after Dad died, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. The symptoms had been there, but the last person she was paying attention to was herself. And psychological health. Again, it's just something that seems to go on the bottom of the priority list. The carer isn't the person where the focus is, and there are good reasons for that, but we need to be mindful about the potential impact on carers of all of that. So, when I said before, learning new skills under stressful conditions, it's not like learning new skills where you sign up for a TAFE course and go, right, I'm going to learn French. It's not like that, yeah? You're doing it under stressful conditions, and you worry about, like, what if I make a mistake? I'm playing at the big end of town. What if I screw up the morphine drip? This isn't small fry. This is big stuff. One of the things that happens in relationships is that regardless of cancer experience, we've probably all experienced this, that we save our worst behaviour for the people closest to us, yeah? For those of you who've got children, you have those lovely experiences where they go for a sleepover and the other parents say, oh, they're just gorgeous, they can come and stay any time. And you think, right, I'll pack their bags because they're absolute rat bags at home. The kids and the husbands and the wives and the daughters and the parents all save their worst behaviour for the people that they love the most. That's because it's a soft place to land. I can be my worst Charlotte for my husband. I save my best Charlotte for my clients. Yeah, no one else gets to see my worst Charlotte, but that means poor Robin because he has to deal with me. Yeah, so carers often get to deal with the worst version of the cancer patient. They keep it together when they're in front of their oncologist. They keep it together when they're in the infusion suite, and then they go home and they let it all hang out. One thing that also happens in relationships with when you have a caring experience is that it introduces this thing called dual relationships. So up until diagnosis, you might have had a husband-wife, say, relationship, and then you go to have also, in the same household with the same people, a carer-patient relationship. Does that make sense? And that, again, happens overnight, and nobody sits you down and says, hey, listen, this is what's going to happen. It just sort of sneaks up on you. And it's all fine when the husband is talking to the wife as a wife and the wife is talking to the husband as a husband. That works. And same with the patient and carer. The problem is when you cross the wires. So I'll give you an example. My husband likes my veal parmigiana. And when I was sick, if he said to me, and he was talking to me as his wife, he said to me, darling, I really like your veal parmigiana. Do you think you could make the veal parmigiana tonight? And if I was in wife mode, I would say, sure, darling, I'll make the veal parmigiana. If I was in patient mode, I would say, you've got to be fucking joking. Yeah, do you get the difference? Yeah. And nobody explains this stuff, and nobody gives you a red and white hat and says, okay, when you're in wife mode, put your white hat on. When you're in patient mode, put your red hat on. Nobody does that. So you never know what you're going to get until you're in it. Yeah. So just understanding that there are these dual relationships going on in your household, in your relationship, can be helpful, because you can intervene and go, okay, hang on a second, are you talking to me as a wife or are you talking to me as a carer? Yeah. The cancer card. So the cancer card is this idea that it's like a trump card, and it's silent and it's implicit. So it's the idea that if I've got cancer, nothing trumps that. My experience is worse than anything anyone else can bring to the table. Now, most cancer patients don't ever play the cancer card out loud. Most people don't do that because they sort of understand how powerful it is. But it sits in the room, and it sits in the house, and it sits in the relationship, and it can invalidate the carer's own lived experience, because when they're having a shit day, they don't feel like they can say, I'm having a shit day. Because the other silent thing in the room is, well, it doesn't matter how shit it is, you don't have cancer. So sometimes just understanding that there is a cancer card, even if it's never played, even if it's never acknowledged openly, but just knowing that it is in the house can be really helpful for the carer, can be really helpful for them to know that we get, as the cancer patient, that we get the fact that this whole experience has set up what we call a power differential, where the person with cancer has a lot more power. Not that they want it, not that they ever want to exercise it, but it just comes with the territory. Does that make sense? The snow globe effect. So I need to just put it in the handbag. I go to every talk I go to, I get to this, and then I go, oh, I've got my snow globe. A snow globe. Yeah, you can buy them everywhere you travel, and you shake them up and the snowflakes all go up. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so the snow globe effect is an analogy for the cancer experience. So imagine I'm holding a snow globe, and the snow globe is your life. And when you get a cancer diagnosis, it shakes up your life. And all the little snowflakes that get shaken up, they're your values and priorities. And when they settle, none of them settle exactly where they used to be. So things that didn't used to matter might matter, and things that mattered before sometimes don't matter anymore. Almost every client I've ever had talks to me about this sort of experience. Now, for a lot of people, this is really positive because it clarifies their values. It makes them figure out what matters, what's important and what's not. And it gives them an increased willingness to live according to that clarity, to prioritise their own needs. Okay, so that all sounds pretty good. However, if you're a carer or a husband or a wife, someone intimately involved with someone who's gone through that snow globe experience, it can be a bit tough because you might not share some of that clarity. Things that you might have agreed on in the past might not actually be the same anymore. A good friend of mine was diagnosed with cancer a couple of weeks ago, and in the moment that she was diagnosed, sitting in the oncologist's office, she thought, right, we're selling the house. Now, I'm not entirely sure that her partner is 100% on board with that, yeah? So even though it works really nicely for some people, it can set up problems in the relationship. After I was diagnosed, I had a lot of this stuff going on. I was like, right, there's all of these things I really do want to do, and there's all of these things I'm definitely never going to do. And my husband was okay with some of them, but some of them he was like, hey, hang on a second. That's okay for you, but this is a relationship. And we need to remember that, like, what we're going to do for you might have some implications for what's going to happen to the family. So for carers, this stuff can be tricky. Because again, because of the cancer card, you don't necessarily feel as a carer that you can go, I'm not sure about that. Does that make sense? When the snow globe effect is tricky. Okay, the oxygen mask analogy. This is important. Most of you will have been on a plane You'll have seen the air hostie. I know that's bad language, but anyway, that's from growing up. Air hostie at the front of the plane, and they'll do the, in the unlikely event, if there's a emergency, the oxygen mask will drop from the compartment above your head. And then they say, fit it to yourself before you fit it to anybody else. The reason they say that is that if you don't fit it to yourself first, what will happen? You'll pass out. And then how useful will you be to someone else? Not at all. Yep. It's the same logic with carers. If they go down, who's left to look after the person with cancer? So sometimes we have to be really mindful of this stuff. And sometimes the carers aren't going to be the ones to say this. It means that they need time for themselves and they need time for self-care. And they're not necessarily the same thing. They can be the same thing, but they can be different things. Sometimes people just need time. My client I was telling you about with the morphine drip last night, he saw me on Monday, but we talked about the fact that he needed to just carve out some time, get one of the daughters to come in and mind his wife while he could just go to the movies. He didn't need to go to the movies, he didn't care about the movie, he just needed to sit in a space where he wasn't managing morphine pumps, Domino caring. So this is where I talk about the fact that if I'm a cancer patient and I lean on my carer needs someone to lean on, and that person needs someone to lean on, and so that's like dominoes, okay? And so that's where we need to make sure that, just like Amanda was saying, we need support sources. We need support sources for cancer patients. We need support sources for cancer carers. GP, church community or pastor, therapist, can be a psychologist, can be a different sort of therapist, family members, trusted friends, and carer support groups or organisations. So there are things out there, but we need to give carers permission and encouragement and time to access them. That's done. Right.